Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
Taxi!
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. You know, back in the 1970s, there's a very famous Esquire magazine article by a famous writer entitled Frank Sinatra Had a Cold. It's when Old Blue Eyes, the chairman of the board, gave an interview despite the fact that he had a little cold. Well, I've got a little cold and I'm recovering from it. So if you hear a cough tonight, just recognize the show must go on. You know, in foreign policy, timing, leverage, and national interest must guide the strategy of engagement with rising powers. President Richard Nixon grasped this principle as well as any chief executive during his groundbreaking 1972 opening to China. President Bill Clinton, on the other hand, failed his test when he championed China's entry into the World Trade Organization and the permanent normal trade relations, that's most favored nation trading status. That's what made China the dangerous superpower they are today. President Donald Trump's recent state visit to Beijing revives the Nixonian tradition of pragmatic, interest-driven diplomacy with the foreign policy adversary, engaging from strength while delivering concrete American wins, while actively correcting the structural imbalances and strategic vulnerabilities created by the failures of past policies. You see, when Nixon landed in Beijing, that was February 1972, China was still a desperately poor agrarian society still recovering from the Cultural Revolution. Rural areas largely lacked indoor plumbing, and electricity was minimal, particularly in the rural areas. Rural electricity consumption was only about 10% of national totals in the 1960s and 70s. Its military was massive in manpower, but technologically extremely backwards, with limited projection capability. Their GDP per capita hovered around subsistence levels. Nixon, the consummate anti-communist, pursued classical realpolitik, exploiting the Sino-Soviet split in order to isolate Moscow, ease pressure in Vietnam, and create a triangular balance of power. You see, Nixon needed the help of both the Chinese and the Russians to end the war in Vietnam. The Shanghai communiqué was deliberately cautious, acknowledging differences, opposing hegemony in Asia, and committing to gradual normalization and people-to-people contacts without massive technology transfers or one-sided economic concessions. Trade in 1972 stood at a mere $95.9 million. Nixon built a bridge across 22 years of hostility, famously declaring it the week that changed the world. But he did so without arming or enriching a future rival at America's expense. Clinton's policy, on the other hand, marked a sharp and consequential departure from Nixon's success. Convinced that economic liberalization would foster political openness, the Clinton administration granted the most favored nation trading status to China in 2000 and supported China's World Trade Organization ascension in 2001. U.S. officials projected modest trade growth and mutual benefits. Unfortunately, reality proved otherwise. Pre-World Trade Organization, the U.S. goods trade deficit with China was about $83 billion. By 2015, it had ballooned to $367 billion, an annual average increase of over $20 billion a year. Imports from China surged from $102 billion to $483 billion, while U.S. exports grew far more slowly from a much smaller base. Economists estimate this China shock displaced 2.4 to 3.4 million U.S. jobs, with roughly $2.6 million of those jobs lost in manufacturing, devastating communities in electronics, apparel, furniture, and other sectors. China's economy, of course, exploded, 11 times larger by some measures, post-ascension, fueled by foreign investment, technological transfers, and export-led growth. Its military modernization rapidly shifting from coastal defense to blue water ambitions. What Nixon engaged as a weak agrarian power, Clinton's policies helped transform into an economic and military superpower. Now, President Trump's May 2026 visit to China reflects a return to the Nixonian calculus adapted by 21st century realities. Direct personal engagement, tangible reciprocal deals, and firm guardrails on strategic competition. Like Nixon's trip, it featured high-level meetings, cultural exchanges, and a warm rapport with leadership. Xi Jinping may be a wicked guy, just like Mao Zedong clearly was, but those characterizations are often immaterial pertaining to geopolitical realities. Unlike Clinton's broad market opening that disproportionately benefited China, President Trump secured very specific wins for American exporters. China committed to an initial 200 Boeing aircraft purchase, with potential expansion to 750 planes, plus hundreds of GE jet engines, reopening a critical market for U.S. aviation and supporting thousands of American manufacturing jobs. Agricultural agreements promised double-digit billions in annual purchases of U.S. soybeans, beef, pork, and other farm programs. Expanded imports of American oil and natural gas further bolster U.S. energy producers. New bilateral mechanisms, including a U.S.-China Board of Trade under a reciprocal tariff framework, aim to stabilize ties on a much more balanced basis. These outcomes contrast sharply with the post-Clinton imbalances. President Trump negotiates from strength, leveraging tariffs, export controls, and alliances while delivering immediate benefits to U.S. farmers, manufacturers, and energy workers. The approach wisely manages competition without repeating that naive bet that economic integration alone would somehow moderate Beijing's behavior. Nixon engaged in a fragmented, impoverished China to encounter the Soviets. President Trump is engaging a powerful China to prevent dominance in key sectors, secure supply chain resilience, and protect critical infrastructure and technology. Trump has scored with a commitment from China not to provide weapons to Iran, and China will not support Iran's development of a nuclear weapon, at the same time getting commitments for the purchase of American agricultural products like soybean, beef, and pork. Big difference. The Chinese have also agreed to purchase 200 Boeing aircraft, as I say. Trump deals from strength and has cut China's access to cheap oil from Venezuela and Iran. That's why he had the whip hand going into these negotiations. History underscores the difference in risk. Engaging a weak China in 1972 carried manageable downsides, but empowering it through unconditional access after 2000 gave a burgeoning rival everything it needed to obtain global hegemony. President Trump's bridge building seeks to restore reciprocity and leverage, honoring Nixon's realism while repairing decades of policy missteps. The test ahead is whether sustained pressure and a targeted engagement can produce a stable, interest-based relationship that prioritizes American workers' security and prosperity, outcomes put on the back burner due to the neoliberal Clinton consensus. In an era of competing world powers, Nixon's prudence, without wearing ideological rose-colored glasses, offers the wiser path forward. And President Donald Trump recognizes it, coming back with solid wins. Meanwhile, the strength of the Trump endorsement is proven yet again. Senator Bill Cassidy, Dr. Bill Cassidy's political career came to an abrupt halt in Saturday's Republican Louisiana primary. They rejected the U.S. Senate incumbent, pushing him into a third-place finish in the state's Republican primary. He actually got less than 25%, which is the low water mark of all time for an incumbent senator running for re-election within the Republican Party. Republican-endorsed Congresswoman Julia Letlow led the field with about 45% of the vote, while State Treasurer John Fleming faced second with 28%. Both of them, by the way, solid Trump supporters. The two will now advance to a June 27th runoff, leaving Cassidy on the outside looking in. Senator Cassidy's collapse was years in the making. He angered the Republican base by actually voting to convict President Trump after January 6th, repeatedly backing the bankrupt and failing Obamacare program, and candidly whoring himself out to the corrupt healthcare industry. Cassidy, unsurprisingly, also had deep ties to Big Pharma, including taking over $1.2 million in career contributions from the pharmaceutical and health products sector. Cassidy's opponents pointed to donations from major pharma executives after Cassidy became the top Republican on the Senate Health Committee in 2023, as well as his opposition to drug pricing reforms that would have helped working families. Cassidy's defeat marks the first time since 2021 that a sitting U.S. Senator has lost a regularly scheduled primary. That was when Indiana's Dick Lugar was beaten by Richard Murdoch. Letlow now enters the runoff as the Trump-aligned frontrunner. She has campaigned on border security, American energy, and fighting woke policies. She will be a reliable vote for President Trump in the U.S. Senate, and the message will be sent to every other rhino that they need to vote consistently with the America First line. Now, I've been in American politics for over 50 years. I can tell you President Ronald Reagan was extraordinarily popular, perhaps one of the most popular presidents in my lifetime, but his endorsement never packed the kind of wallop that Donald Trump's endorsement does. He has, as he's proud to say, a 95% win rate in those races where he has endorsed a candidate. And that certainly continued in Louisiana. Woe be it to those U.S. senators or congressmen who oppose the Trump agenda, because you may very well be next. Incumbents don't lose. 98% of incumbents win re-election. Senator Cassidy is that rare exception, and that's because he fooled around and found out. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back with more politics.